Hey everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive. You know how this works. We take your research requests and, well, we dive deep. So buckle up, because today we're talking about, oh, it's a big one. Trump is back in the White House.
Back in the White House indeed.
And that's not even the half of it. It looks like China might be making some power plays with Russia kind of struggling right now.
Yeah, things are definitely heating up on the global stage.
And get this, they're renaming cities in outer Manchuria.
Really?
Oh yeah, we've got some fascinating sources for this deep dive.
I can't wait to dig into them.
We'll unpack all of that. Plus, we'll look at whether this could actually be the end of the war in Ukraine. I mean, could it?
A lot to unpack there for sure. The stakes are high, not just for these countries, but for the whole world. This could be a major power shift in the making.
Absolutely. So let's start with the big shocker. Trump's win. I mean, not only did he beat Kamala Harris.
Which, let's be honest, a lot of people weren't expecting.
Right. But he won both the popular vote, AD, the Electoral College.
It's a pretty decisive victory, for sure. And it's interesting to see how world leaders are reacting. Boris Johnson seems pretty thrilled. He's already talking about a renewed partnership based on shared values. You know, the whole 9 yards.
Well, you always did have a bit of bromance with Trump.
Right. And then you've got Netanyahu calling it a historic victory, which, knowing his style, is probably a bit of an understatement.
Understatement of the year, maybe. And even Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Who's known for, you know, his strongman tactics, let's just say.
Exactly. Even he's praising Trump's return.
Yeah.
But let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What's Trump actually planning to do? You know?
Yeah, everyone's wondering about that. We've got this source here outlining his 10 major policies.
10?
10.
Yeah.
And let's just say some of them are raising eyebrows already.
Oh, I bet. Let's hear it. What's got everyone buzzing?
Well, it's a real mixed bag. On the one hand, he's pushing for peace talks in Ukraine, which on the surface sounds good, right?
Right. Peace, who doesn't love peace?
Exactly. But he's also hinting that Ukraine might have to make some territorial concessions to get there.
Ooh, that's going to be controversial.
To say the least.
Yeah, that's raising all sorts of red flags for people. And what about China? Anywhere on the trade war front?
Oh, yeah. That's definitely on the table. He's talking about potentially reigniting that whole thing. Remember how those tariffs rocked the boat last time?
Oh, yeah. Things got pretty tense.
Yeah.
So much for smooth sailing.
And speaking of rocking the boat, he's also planning to dismantle a lot of those environmental regulations. And you guessed it, pull out of the Paris Agreement again.
Oh, boy. Here we go again.
It seems like we're heading back to that America First approach, which, you know, could have some serious consequences for global cooperation.
Yeah, not exactly sending a message of teamwork there.
Right. And think about the implications for climate change and trade. This is a big deal.
For sure. And what about on the home front? Any big changes brewing?
Oh, plenty. He's planning some major shakeups domestically, too. We're talking about rolling back abortion rights, cutting federal funding for education, promoting school prayer.
Wow, this is going to be a bumpy ride.
Buckle up. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out for American democracy. I mean, there's a lot of concern about increased polarization and social unrest.
Yeah, a lot to digest, for sure.
Yeah.
So while America's going through all this upheaval, China's just watching and waiting.
They're definitely paying attention, and they might be seeing an opportunity here.
I mean, they do have this so-called limitless alliance with Russia.
Right. But it's not exactly built on trust and friendship, is it?
Yeah, it's a good point. The China-Russia relationship has always been complicated.
To put it mildly, they've got a long history of rivalry going all the way back to the Cold War and even further.
Oh, yeah. Give us a little history lesson here.
Well, for example, there was that battle over Damansky Island in 1969. Almost escalated into a full-blown war between China and the Soviet Union.
Damansky Island? I don't think I've heard of that one.
Both sides claimed the island, and it ended up being this bloody fight with casualties on both sides. It was a real wake-up call.
Yeah.
You know, even when they're supposed to be allies, there's a lot of mistrust and competition between them.
So basically, they've got this history of bad blood.
Yeah, you could say that. And that makes their current alliance even more intriguing, especially with Russia struggling in Ukraine.
It seems like China's trying to walk this tightrope. They need Russia to counterbalance the West. But they also don't want to get dragged down by their problems.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act. They're offering some economic and diplomatic support, but they're being very careful not to cross any lines that would trigger those Western sanctions.
So they're being cautious, but also strategic. And speaking of strategic, let's talk about China's territorial ambitions. Everyone knows they've got their eyes on outer Manchuria.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. It's a huge chunk of land that Russia took from them back in the 19th century. And China's been getting increasingly assertive about their claims in recent years.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
It's not just talk either. They're actually making moves.
Right. There was that treaty in 2004 where they got half of Bolshoi Ussuriski Island back.
Yeah.
But then just a couple years ago, they published maps claiming the whole thing.
Wow. Talk about sending a message.
It's like they're saying, we're coming for what we believe is ours, Russia, whether you like it or not.
So it's not just about historical claims here.
Not at all. China's facing a major resource crunch, especially when it comes to fresh water. Did you know that a staggering 90% of their groundwater is polluted and undrinkable?
90%? That's insane.
Yeah, it's a serious problem. They need new sources, and guess where they're looking?
Siberia, with all those vast forests, and Lake Baikal, the world's largest freshwater lake.
Bingo. And with Russia's Far East struggling economically and their population dwindling, it's starting to look like a pretty tempting target.
So we've got a newly emboldened China, weakened Russia, and a wild card in the form of Trump back in the White House. This is where things could get really, really interesting.
The possibilities are endless, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
So we've set the stage, Trump's back, China's making moves, and Russia's looking vulnerable. But what does it all mean?
Right. What are the possible outcomes here?
Yeah, what are the most likely scenarios that could play out?
Well, one possibility, and this is a dramatic one, is a complete collapse of Russia.
Whoa, hold on. Collapse? How are we talking?
Imagine the war in Ukraine just drags on. The economy completely implodes. The government loses all control.
Okay, that's a pretty intense thought.
Yeah.
What would that even look like?
It's hard to say for sure. Would a new government emerge? Maybe a more democratic one?
Or would it just be chaos? More infighting?
Yeah, it's Russia. We're talking about a long history of authoritarian rule. So a smooth transition to democracy doesn't seem very likely.
More likely we'd see power struggles between different factions.
Yeah.
Maybe even a civil war.
Exactly. And then there's the question of the nukes. I mean, that's got to be the biggest worry, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. If Russia implodes, who's going to be in charge of that massive nuclear arsenal?
It's a chilling thought, to be honest. The possibility of those weapons falling into the wrong hands.
A rogue general?
Mm.
A separatist group, terrorists?
It's a nightmare scenario.
Okay, so maybe a full-blown collapse is worst-case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But even if Russia manages to hold itself together, it's still going to be weakened by this war, right?
Definitely. This war has taken a huge toll.
So what does that mean for China and their ambitions?
That's where things get really interesting. A weakened Russia could be a blessing and a curse for China at the same time.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, it creates an opportunity for them to exert more influence, maybe even grab some territory.
Okay, so they benefit from a weaker Russia.
But on the other hand, they don't want to see Russia completely fall apart.
Why not? Wouldn't that make it easier for them to just take what they want?
Not necessarily. A chaotic, unstable Russia right on their border. Major security risk.
Oh, I see. So instability is bad for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It could lead to refugee flows, terrorism, even a spillover of the conflict.
And don't forget about the possibility of Russia aligning with the West.
Right. That would be a huge strategic setback for China.
So they're in a tough spot.
For sure. They want Russia weak enough to be pliable, but not so weak that it collapses.
It's a delicate balance.
They'll likely continue to provide just enough support to keep Russia afloat. But at the same time, they'll use their economic leverage to extract concessions and advance their own interests.
So basically, they're playing the long game.
Exactly, waiting for the right moment to make their move.
But let's not forget about the wild card in all of this, Trump.
Ah, yes, Trump. The unpredictable factor.
How is his return going to impact this whole geopolitical chess match?
It's the big unknown. Trump's foreign policy is notoriously unpredictable.
Well, that's one way to put it.
He could try to exploit the situation to his advantage, maybe by playing China and Russia off against each other.
Ooh, that's a classic move.
But he could also make things worse. Alienate allies, escalate tensions. It's really a toss-up.
Yeah, I mean, remember when he pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal?
Or when he started that trade war with China.
The man's not exactly known for his diplomatic skill.
Right. And his approach to Ukraine is particularly worrying.
How so?
He's already hinted that he might be open to letting Russia keep some of the territory it seized. That would be a huge win for Putin, and a major blow to Ukraine and its allies.
Now, what kind of message would that send to other countries with territorial ambition?
Exactly. It could embolden China to be even more assertive in its claims on outer Manchuria and Siberia.
And that could lead to a whole new conflict.
Potentially one with global consequences.
So basically, we're in a situation where even the experts don't know what's going to happen next.
Well, predicting the future is always tricky, especially in geopolitics.
That's reassuring.
But what we can do is look at the trends, analyze the players, try to understand the potential consequences of different actions.
So that's what we're doing here on the deep dive, trying to make sense of it all.
Exactly.
All right, so where do we go from here? We've talked about potential scenarios, but what are the key factors that are going to determine how this all plays out?
Good question. There are a few things to keep an eye on. First, the course of the war in Ukraine.
Okay, so if Russia starts winning,
It will be emboldened, and China will be more likely to support them. But if Ukraine manages to push back, that could change the dynamics significantly.
so the battlefield situation is crucial. Got it. What else?
Second, the internal stability of Russia. If Putin's grip on power weakens, whether it's due to economic problems or internal dissent, that could create an opening for China to exert even more influence.
So we need to watch for any signs of cracks in the Kremlin. Makes sense.
Hmm.
What else should we be paying attention to? Right, so we're watching the war in Ukraine and keeping an eye on things inside Russia. What's the third factor we should be paying attention to?
Well, the third, and this is the most unpredictable factor, is Trump himself. I mean, his actions could really throw a wrench in things.
Yeah, when you say unpredictable.
I mean, if he decides to take a hard line against China, it could push them even closer to Russia, even if they're having second thoughts about the whole thing.
Yeah, he's not exactly known for being subtle. But could he go the other way? Could he try to buddy up with Russia, maybe even at the expense of our relationship with China?
It's not impossible. You know, Trump's always had this kind of admiration for strongmen like Putin.
Yeah, it's not
And he hasn't exactly been shy about breaking with traditional alliances.
If he thinks it's in America's interest to side with Russia against China,
He might just do it.
that would be a pretty big gamble, though, wouldn't it? I mean, China's a major economic powerhouse. They hold a lot of U.S. debt. Antagonizing them could have some serious blowback.
It would definitely be risky, but with Trump, you can never rule anything out.
True enough. So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they be watching for in the coming months and years to understand how this is all going to shake out?
I think the key is to pay attention to the signals coming from all three players, China, Russia, and the U.S. watch, for any shifts in their rhetoric, their policies, and their actions.
So, like, are they moving closer together? Are they drifting apart? Are they ratcheting up the tension or trying to cool things down?
Exactly. The more information you have, the better equipped you'll be to understand the dynamics and anticipate what might happen next.
So basically, we need to become geopolitical detectives, looking for clues in everything from diplomatic statements to military deployments to economic data.
You got it.
I like it. It's like our own real-life spy thriller.
Exactly. And it highlights why it's so important to stay informed, to dig deeper than just the headlines.
Which is what we try to do here on the Deep Dive.
Absolutely. In a world where information is power, understanding these complex geopolitical issues is more crucial than ever.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank all of you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of China-Russia relations and the impact of Trump's return.
It's a wild ride, for sure.
We know it's a lot to take in, but hopefully you found it informative and maybe even a little bit entertaining.
And hopefully it sparks more curiosity.
As always, you can find links to all the sources we discuss on our website and keep those research requests coming. We love hearing from you.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that matters.
Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay informed.